Next up on things to do is to fix the actual part of the car that needs fixing, the engine. So when I took it out, the first thing that I did was line it to top dead center so you have a decent starting point, because we're going to need to pull the heads off. Now I'm hoping I won't have to get the heads resurfaced, but my expectations are always a bit lower than my hopes, so yeah. Bright side though, and I don't know if it's a bright side, but it does look like it's been worked on before. So there are some marks here on the cam gears, one on this, here, 3 and 4, which are usually a sign that someone removed the head. So what you would do is, and I'll do it too, is you mark the belt. Actually, I don't need to do it because I'm getting a new timing belt, so I'm gonna have to realign everything anyway. But what you do is you take this mark and mark the belt as well. So when you take everything apart and then you put it back together, and you put the timing belt on, you just have to mark it with this tooth as well where the mark is at, and then you don't have to worry about timing being incorrect. In addition, the water pump looks relatively new. It's just cleaner than the other parts, but we are going to be replacing that. We're pretty much going to be replacing any gasket on the top end, as well as replacing the oil pan gasket, because that's just something to do when the car is out, because you're not going to have this opportunity again. We also have a power steering pump to replace. I was told the power steering pump is bad by the previous owner because the power steering didn't work. Turns out there wasn't even a belt connecting it. I did get a new serpentine belt, so I'm hoping that one will reach all the way across and connect this, because there is no AC on this car at all. Like, the pump's just not even there. I'm assuming you'd go somewhere in this general area. There's no pump even connected, which doesn't matter because the lines are disconnected anyway and we already took those out. But that's essentially the plan. Since today we've kind of been in a painting mood, painting that, painting all these other parts around here, I think we'll probably start out by doing the same. So what we're going to be doing is starting to take off the top end, take off the intake and valve covers. We'll leave the cam gears on for now, and then get these starting to be painted and set aside, as well as probably refreshing up around the alternator. So that's the rough plan. If things change, then that's just the way it goes. So let's just get started. Got the valve covers and intake manifold off. Something you may notice once I get it close is there's a little milky liquid on there, and that was unfortunately the oil. So it's a telltale sign that the head gaskets are blown. I mean, when we drained the coolant as well, it was no bueno. The nice thing is the camshafts don't look too bad. The valves I'm a little concerned about, although being honest, I don't know exactly how to inspect them. So once I take the heads off, I'm going to do a little research and kind of see what I can tell from them. But up next is I need to go inside, figure out the bolt pattern for the head so I know which way to remove it so it doesn't warp. Then I'm going to go ahead and start marking everything up so I know where top dead center is. Mark the cam position sensor so I know how to put that back in correctly. So pretty much everything is marked and good to go, so we have to do as little work as possible realigning everything once it's all back together. So that's where we're going now. It's research time. Well, we hit a speed bump that I can't overcome. So here's our gasket kit for the Mitsubishi 3000 GT. They spelled Mitsubishi 3000 GT a little differently than they should have. I'm not a 4-cylinder. This is ridiculous. I'm so mad. So I flipped my engine over to get inspecting on the oil pan and my rod bearings. I totally forgot there was going to be liquid inside of it still. I made just a little bit of a mess. But let's go ahead and get the oil pan off so we can inspect that, because I can at least make a gasket to put that back on if the rod bearings are okay. Not a total loss since we have the whole wrong gasket kit. Just a major setback. An annoying one. It's so stupid. That is straight sludge in there. My goodness. Well, that's gonna get a good clean. The same sort of sludge oil is in all of this as well. Once we get the car running, we are definitely going to have to do an oil flush relatively quickly just to make sure we got all the bad stuff out. But yeah, it's nice to have that off. So after a tough night of painting, everything is good to go that we need to start rebuilding the car, and we got the correct gasket kit in. So we put a little metallic flake on the oil pan. Now I am totally aware that some of this may wear off, as I mentioned with the engine bay painting video. I'm just not gonna have this opportunity to do it again. And since I really don't, I care, but I don't care about having it painted. I wanna have it painted because I can make it look better than what it is right now, and it'll be satisfying for me in the moment. But I also don't care in the sense that if it starts to wear off a little over time, really not a huge deal, because it's an oil pan. But I do have these other parts of the car that I painted with, like the intake I did wrinkle paint on, and I did for the valve covers as well, that I'll show you in a second. But this stuff I do want to last. I do want to paint this red, although I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do it yet, because with the Miata when I did it, all these letters were indented like these, where there's a divot that goes in and I can use the syringe to fill them with red paint. But when you come over to where it says twin turbo intercooled, if you can see that, that is not indented, it's exdented, lol. So I'm gonna need to find a way to get those red, and I'm not super confident with the brush, so I just need to figure out the best way to do it before I start whacking away. And then over here we have the valve covers. This is the one for the front. You can tell because it says V6 Mitsubishi, and this is the back one. It's flat, a lot more boring. They obviously didn't care as much about the one in the back that's already hidden under the air intake. So actual work-wise though, what's next? Well, let me tell you. So now is when we're going to start really tearing the engine apart. We're gonna be yanking off the heads of each side and then starting to rebuild everything. We're gonna put in a new water pump. We have a new timing belt, although this one is actually surprisingly tight. But we have a new timing belt anyway, and since we need to take this one off, it just makes sense to put the new one on. We're gonna do new head gaskets, new valve covers. This is getting a full gasket refresh, top to bottom, from car driving by, sounds nice. And that's the way we're going to go. But since we're going to be spending the majority, if not all the time, with the engine in this orientation, we're gonna start by flipping it and then getting the oil pan all sealed up, because that way it can set and dry while we get the rest going. So let's dive in. All right, here's my dilemma. We ran into the best kind of issue you could have. So up next for me to do was to take off the timing belt and then the water pump, and then replace the water pump, the tensioner, this pulley as well from the whole, I got a whole timing belt kit over yonder area. But I was just staring at it, and this all is brand new. Like this silver compared to like the rusted, a bit worn down silver of the whole rest of the car, as well as the bolts look like they've been replaced, like they're new, they're shiny compared to all these other ones that are dull. There's no wear on these rubber in these pulleys at all. All there is this rust water from when I washed it. Everything is just new about it. And so I was thinking, do I really need to pull this off and replace it with my new one? Because if this one is working, which it would be since it's new, then there's no point to, because the only main issue that I have is that the head gaskets are leaking. So I don't think I'm gonna replace this. Now, I'm not sure if this is the greatest idea, but I feel like it is because now I have a backup kit in case something goes wrong. And being realistic, eventually I will want to do more power on the car, and the easiest way to do those mods would probably be pulling the engine out. I mean, there's probably gonna be a way around it, but at least now I know how to pull parts of the car off a lot quicker than I did before, so I'm getting a lot of experience either way. Just knowing myself, I don't know if it's the best idea to pull this off and risk the new one that I put in, me installing it incorrectly. Although that likelihood is incredibly low, it's a risk that I would have to take. And since I do know that the car ran before I pulled everything apart, I do know that it is in working condition. I mean, as we saw when we drained the fluids, the only issue was this coolant that is looking milky. And that's oil, but the coolant was the same color for reference. So I think the next step that we're going to do is we are going to take this off because we have to take the heads off. I'm going to go ahead and mark it now, mark the timing belt, and then start taking the heads off and replacing the head gaskets and then putting it all back together, because that should be the only thing that needs to be fixed on this car. Now, the part that makes me the most uneasy about it is the fact that it does seem a little too easy. Like, it shouldn't be this simple. So unless it's something where this is just a project that's been going quicker than I was anticipating because I got a free week to work on it, I don't know, but we're just gonna go ahead and start taking that apart, replacing the head gaskets, and that's the best I got for you, honestly, so here we go. I'm actually kind of excited, but nervous, more nervous. Just ran into another small issue, kind of annoying. So the water neck is already disconnected, it's ready to be taken off. It can wiggle. The only issue is right here. This is where I mounted it up to the engine stand, and it's hitting this hose right in there. So I can't pull this one back without hitting this. So I need to figure out a way around that. I think I might see if I could just detach just this one peg to get it off, and then I'll reattach it. But that's where we're at. Everything else still coming along pretty smoothly. That wasn't a pain and a half. It was 2 pains. Well, look at this water neck. Nice. So this thing is pretty well covered in all sorts of residue and dried coolant. I don't know if it's calcified. I'm just throwing out terms to make me sound smart. But about a month and a couple weeks ago, I ordered a new one of these, and it still hasn't finished processing. So unfortunately, we may have to put this one back on in the meantime, just so we can get the car running, because I don't want to just have the engine sitting here waiting for one piece to come in. So what we're going to do to refresh this is we're going to pull it completely apart, clean everything up, make sure everything is sealed, everything is flowed, there's no cracks, nothing of that sort, because the previous owner, as I'd mentioned in another video, was chasing coolant leaks, and I'm assuming this is the source, especially because right in there we see a whole bunch of buildup. So I'm hoping that when we take this apart, we'll be able to sort that out. Now, my one concern is that these bolts may snap, and if that is so, then that'll be a big issue, because then we'll have to drill it out and retap it, or just wait for the new one to come in. So I am slightly concerned about that, because I'm assuming the leak is coming from right in here. But there's no way I'm going to put this back on there without pulling this apart and at least giving it somewhat of a refresh, because that would be kind of dumb to just put the thing that's the issue back on. Anyway, we need to go back to getting this to get the heads off, and then we'll probably call it a day from there, but we might not, so we'll see. First off, though, I've only had a couple cups of coffee right now, and I'm kind of needing more. I did the math, and I drink 10 cups of coffee a day. How cool is that? Quick update, we got some good news. So with this side's manifold taken off, one of the things I wanted to do is quickly check the exhaust ports. And what we don't see are that any of them are wet, which means that there is no oil leaking through the piston rings, which means we don't have to replace them. So that's super good. So we're on to the other side, then we'll be able to remove both heads. I could technically take this one off right now, but for me it's easier mentally to do them both at the same time, so that way I kind of have everything in mind, remembered where they should go. So it's just more organized for me, so we're gonna go ahead and take that side off, and then we'll be able to take the heads off. When I opened those heads up, there was like oil water and coolant water inside. It smells so bad, it made me gag. I had to leave or I was gonna puke. But we got the heads off. Check this out. We got one sitting over there, another one sitting over there. Now when I examined the head gaskets, I didn't see huge signs, like there wasn't any sign of it where it had essentially blown. But if you look, this piston is pretty clean compared to this one and this one. And on the other side, you see some signs where this one is clean on the top. You can't really tell. Same with this one, probably gonna have the same issue. Where this one is much dirtier. And so what usually happens is if they're clean, that's actually a bad sign, because what's cleaning them is the fact that coolant is getting in, and then when the gas gets in and it ignites, it essentially steam cleans the top of the pistons off. So they should be black, covered in carbon. Also, I just noticed this engine has one huge issue, and I just got really sad. That piston has a chunk missing. Dang, that really just happened, I guess. Wow. All right. Dang, that is actually really sad. Bummer. Well, and on that note, I think that's going to be the end of the video, because there's nothing else we could really do in the meantime. So it looks like we're going to have to source some new pistons. We're going to have to tear the block apart, probably get it sent off to get rebored. Dang, there's a whole chunk gone. So this is at top dead center right now. So I don't know if there's any scoring on the inside, but I'm assuming so. I haven't inspected the valves, but that is a bummer. That is a bummer. Well, like and subscribe, boys. Like and subscribe. Adios.